And our agenda today, pretty straightforward there. We're going to give you some updates on the grants, both the current one and the one that we have in the pipeline. Adriana is going to share some information about Safe Streets Approach project-based tool. Laura is going to speak a little bit about our road safety audit process. We'll talk about the upcoming FDOT Safety Summit. I'll give an update on our mile vision counts and the new technology that we have and what we can do with that. And then Catherine's going to go over the new quick build guide. And then as related to that, our member highlight will be Laura Hardwick featuring the City of Orlando's quick build efforts. And then we'll wrap things up with some miscellaneous items. And off we go. So the grant update, we are still under our original grant that we received back in February of 23, wrapping up a number of things. All the regional plan has been adopted. We are continuing to do work on the speaker series and of course the task force meetings, which you're attending right now. All three of the county Vision Zero plans have been adopted and almost all of the municipal plans. We've also got 3 demonstration projects still ongoing, one for each of the 3 counties, a technology near miss analysis using traffic signal cameras in Seminole County, an analysis to find crosswalk opportunities in Osceola County, and then developing a middle school bicycle program for Orange County. So those are all still in the works and but scheduled to be wrapped up by the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of June. And then we are still waiting to hear what from Federal Highway, the status of our follow-up grant, our supplemental planning, which we were awarded last year, to continue on our outreach, doing things like our extending the reach of our kids' activity book and our educational efforts and continuing our speaker series, and then updating our data and getting to work on our road safety audits to apply to our high injury network, and then just consolidating all the local plans from the standpoint of making sure everything dovetails and we're all collaborating at all levels. But like I said, waiting to hear from Federal Highway on how that might be advancing. All right, any questions on that before I hand over to Adriana? All right, don't see any hands up on that. All right, Adriana will take us to the next section here.
Thank you. Well, as Mike indicated, I'm going to be talking about the Safe System-based product tool and a couple of training sessions that we hosted with FHWA for our staff and partners about STROADs and these resources that are based on the FHWA Safe System approach. So first of all, many of you may be familiar with the term STROAD. A STROAD is a mix between a street and a road. So streets are those segments of our network that primarily serve places. The roads are segments that are primarily serve movement. The STROADs, being a mix of those, try to provide both movement and access, but fails to provide these functions safely or efficiently. Next slide. So the strokes have a high level of mobility, but also high levels of access, high levels of speed, which increases the kinetic energy, and at the same time, high levels of multimodal use, which with high speeds increases the vulnerability to those high levels of kinetic energy. Next slide. So what can we do about this? What can we do to fix strokes? First, we can take a look at policies and standards and implement complete streets and safe system speeds policies. Also, based on data analysis, prioritize methods to help focus on these strokes. In terms of traffic operations and signals, implementing pedestrian and bicycle improvements, as well as strategies to manage conflicts with turning vehicles. And those, again, taking a look at incremental improvements, applying quick build methods, in implementing pilot projects or phase projects can be opportunities to start improving those strokes. Next slide. Okay, so as mentioned before, the FHWA Safe Systems Approach project framework provides new resources for measuring and prioritizing the safe systems approach. When we were developing the regional and local safety plans, these principles were applied to our methods of developing the plans. However, these are resources that are available to you as you advance or implement your plans and your actions. So the Safe System Roadway Design Hierarchy that provides information about countermeasure selection and depending on various tiers. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. The Safe System Policy-Based Alignment Framework helps with identifying those policies and strategies that can be improved or changed to be more in alignment with the safe systems approach. And the project-based alignment framework provides the opportunity to compare different alternatives in terms of safety improvements to the existing conditions of the road to understand which can be a better alternative in terms of safety improvements. Next slide. Okay, so starting with the safe systems roadway design hierarchy, this is a tool that helps evaluate countermeasures based on the safe system principles. Okay, so for there are a number of tiers that identify different, categorize different countermeasures. You can advance, Mike. Okay, so tier 1 includes countermeasures that remove severe conflicts. Next one. Number 2, this tier includes countermeasures that help reduce vehicle speeds. Next one. Tier 3, countermeasures to help manage conflicts in time. And next one, tier 4, includes countermeasures to increase attentiveness and awareness. So this safe system roadway design hierarchy intends to combine countermeasures and strategies for these multiple tiers to get the most efficient, the most effective approach to implement improvements, safety improvements. Next slide. Okay, so our next resource that we are discussing today is the policy-based alignment framework. This framework can be used in multiple ways. It can be a method to benchmark and track progress towards improvement the safe system alignment of the policies in place. Next. It can also help raising the level of awareness of the safe system related practices. Next. It can help to identify those gaps in the existing policy and the program efforts. And it can also help to generate those strategies to improve the safe system alignment in the current practices. Now, it is important to know that the goal of this tool is not to compare between policies. It is more to provide a roadmap for agencies that are looking to better align their policies with the safe systems. Next one. Okay, and the last resource that we are discussing is the project-based alignment framework tool. This tool accounts for 4 different sets of factors, including exposure, crash likelihood, and crash severity, as well as some safety prompts and questionnaires to help identify approaches to implement safe users, safe vehicles, and better post-crash care. Next one. Okay, so this project-based alignment framework tool is an Excel tool that provides a means to compare potential improvements among each other and with the existing conditions. The way that this tool is applied is first, it is used to obtain a score for the existing conditions of the roadway. Then the same tool is used to obtain a score for each of the proposed alternatives. These alternatives can include multiple countermeasures from the different tiers that we were looking before. And once we obtain those scores, we can compare among alternatives compared to the existing conditions to see which one give us the lowest score. The lower the score, the more the alternative is in alignment with the safe system approach. Real quick, I'm gonna share the Excel tool. It is available to download for free at the FHWA website. It provides clear instructions on how to use the tool, some definitions that are helpful to understand some of the questions. And then these are all the tabs that are used to insert the information about existing conditions and then the proposed alternatives to get a final scoring matrix. This final scoring matrix provide the total score. Once you obtain the one for the existing conditions, then the alternatives are incorporated to obtain the total score for the alternatives, which can be compared to identify that one that provides the lowest score compared to the existing conditions score. And lastly, it also provides these qualitative questions that can help identify those improvements needed for these safety elements related to road user, vehicles, and post-crash care. Now going back to the presentation, Mike, next slide, please.
Are you seeing the?
You need to change the view back to.
Yep.
All right. Looks like we're back.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Next slide. Okay. Here you can see the QR codes that will take you to the resources that we discussed, the roadway design hierarchy, the project-based alignment framework, and the policy-based alignment framework. We know that the project-based alignment framework, the Excel sheet that we just reviewed, will be will be improved as the FHWA staff go through trainings and they're getting feedback to make sure that they improve this tool. So it is important to keep checking for any updates that they may publish. And with that, that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, I don't think I see any
Okay.
hands or comments, so.
Okay, I have something to add.
Sorry,
Sorry, I was looking for the hand raise tool. I
this
couldn't
works.
find it as quick as I found the unmute. So I just wanted to share that we have used the policy-based alignment framework tool for our current proposed growth management plan updates at the City of Orlando. The tools are a little wonky, I will say, when you first get in them. But once we sort of got our footing in it, amazing resource. It provided a really good sort of third-party perspective on our growth management plan objectives and goals, and very easy, actionable ways to update them so that it is more literally aligned with the safe systems. So have found the policy-based framework really helpful. It's not as quantitative as the project-based ones, and I haven't had a project for that one yet. But I assume it'll be similar, sort of a little intimidating at first, but once you get in, some really clear quantitative ways that you can improve design on a project.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Laura.
Yeah, that was great perspective. And I'll note that our trainers for this tool, when they were here back in January, noted that other users use this to help them with sort of comparing different countermeasure alternatives to see which ones will be the most in alignment with the safe system hierarchy. And also, not that this is an issue here because everyone has an action plan, or almost everyone has an adopted action plan, but they did note that there are communities throughout the US that were able to obtain Safe Streets for All funding without planning funding, using this tool when they didn't already have an action plan in place as a form of showing how what they plan to do would get them in better coordination with the safe systems hierarchy. So it's a powerful tool. As you get into it, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Adriana or I, particularly on the project-based tool. That's kind of what we focused on for the training. And then it sounds like Laura Hardwick and her team are the experts in the region on the policy-based framework. There are no more questions. Let me check for hands. Go to the next slide. All right, thanks, Mike. So switching gears just a little bit, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about roadway safety audits. It's our intent at MetroPlan Orlando to support the completion of a number of RSAs or types of RSAs on high priority corridors on the high injury networks. Here in the region, as Mike mentioned earlier, they were a significant portion of our application, our 2024 successful 2024 Safe Streets for All application. And while that grant is currently on hold, regardless of what happens there, we do intend to pursue completing RSAs over the coming years. It'll just be sort of the number that we're able to financially support will be dependent on what happens with that grant. But in preparation for doing those RSAs, we worked with a team from FHWA's pedestrian and bicycle safety focus office to complete a train the trainer opportunity that happened at the beginning of February. So we had that FHWA team, here for a full week, and we were able to complete RSAs on two separate corridors. So we spent the first couple days of that week down in Osceola County on Poinciana Boulevard. The segment that we looked at was US 192 south to Siesta Lago Drive. And then the latter part of the week, we were in Orange County over near UCF on University Boulevard, from Dean Road over to Alafaya Trail, right there at the entrance to the university. And so the stakeholder team for those training sessions included some Metro Plan Orlando staff. We had staff from various departments in each county, some other local stakeholders, and then subject matter experts. And both the RSAs that we did sort of utilize FHWA's guidance, their 8-step process for completing an RSA, so that the intent was that attendees, after going through this training, would be able to lead RSAs in the future. Next slide, Mike. So I just want to talk through what that 8-step process involves. And I'll use some of the graphics from our Poinciana Boulevard experience sort of to get us there. So as you can imagine, the first step in the RSA process is identifying what the project's going to be, what your corridor is going to look like. Every local agency is going to have different priorities. And really what it's going to come down to is kind of how much time you're able to spend on the RSA, keeping in mind that for a longer corridor, you're going to need some additional time to be able to complete the field review part of things. Once you've identified the project that you're going to be focusing on, you can move on to selecting that RSA team. It should be an interdisciplinary team. Ideally, it should include at a minimum some planning staff, engineering staff, and enforcement staff. Some other disciplines that would be potentially useful to have either on hand or available by phone while you're out in the field include staff members for maintenance, utilities, folks maybe that are familiar with the types of comments and or complaints that are coming in on that roadway segment can all be useful to get a better understanding of the conditions on the ground or local procedures or requirements that may impact recommended improvements. And then once you have your team together and you've identified who's actually able to participate, you can conduct your startup meeting and reviewing your relevant data. So prior to completing the 2 RSAs in February, Metro Plan Orlando staff worked with local staff at Osceola and Orange County to collect data related to collision data, traffic volumes, maintenance issues, planned improvements, user complaints or requests that had been logged recently, that sort of thing. You can go to the next slide, Mike. Next slide. So the next step, once you have, oh, actually, you can go back. I didn't realize it was taking a while to advance. But once you have your data collected, you can do your preliminary findings meeting where you talk through the data that's been collected. Since this was a training, when we did our preliminary meeting, they sort of talked through that 8-step process and FHWA's guidance on that. But in a normal setting, you're really going to be talking through the data that's been collected and preparing the team to go out for the field reviews, which is the 4th step. And the purpose of those field reviews is really to observe the geometric and operating conditions that are out there on the ground. You're going to have your RSA team out observing site characteristics like roadway geometry, site distance issues, clear zones, what the drainage looks like, where there is signage or not signage, lighting conditions, that sort of thing. You're also going to be looking at traffic characteristics, the typical speeds that you're seeing, the mix of traffic that's on your roadway corridor. Going to be taking a look at surrounding land uses, including where there are traffic generators, where there are pedestrian generators. It's not a land use, but where there are bus stops in relation to some of those pedestrian generators. And then you'll be looking at like link points to the adjacent transportation network as well. As I mentioned before, the length of time that you're going to need to schedule for that field review is pretty dependent on how long your corridor is, and then just sort of how much you expect to be taking in. The next step in the 8-step process is the RSA analysis, which the way that we did it, at least with FHWA, was sort of wrapped in with the field review. But during this step, team members review the available background information, so the crash reports, traffic volumes, that sort of thing, in light of the observed conditions that are in the field. So prior to getting together, our FHW team had already done some of that analysis and had put together sheets that labeled where there were fatalities and had some information about that. And so while we were, as a team out in the field, we were able to talk through those issues, talk about the geometric and other elements that were in the field that may have been contributing to some of those fatalities. Next slide, please, Mike. Yep, thank you. So once your field review is over, the next step is to have your preliminary findings meeting. During this meeting, the team is going to compile and discuss your notes and observations during the field review. You can see on the right side of this slide, we have a graphic where we went through and identified sort of a priority list of the types of safety issues that were encountered on the project. And then we brainstormed potential improvements to mitigate each of those safety issues that we identified. And that's what you can see on the graphic on the right side of the slide. It's very small, but those are each sort of ideas for how you can mitigate safety issues. And then under the model for the 8-step process, the presentation of these preliminary findings and recommendations is made to the roadway owner. And that representative has an opportunity to ask questions, seek clarification on the recommendation. And it's also a useful opportunity for the roadway owner to be able to either suggest additional mitigation measures or to say why there are certain recommendations that likely wouldn't be taken up and why. In the case of the training that we did, our roadway owners were out in the field with us. Actually, for Osceola County, there was some leadership that was present for that preliminary findings meeting, and so we were able to report out to them. But as that preliminary findings meeting wraps up and you get that input from the roadway owner, the RSA team then takes that back and compiles it into a preliminary report that is then sent out to the roadway owner. In the case of the RSAs we just completed, those will be sent to us here at Metro Plan Orlando, and then we will disseminate them to the roadway owner. And there is it is expected that the owner will submit a formal written response that basically talks through which recommendations will likely be pursued, which types may not be pursued, and what the issues were there, any contributing factors related to why certain improvement types would be implemented over others. And then there may be some additional ideas for other countermeasures that the local agency is interested in. Once that written response is received, then the RSA team is able to take those responses and wrap them into a final RSA report. Next slide, please. So our intent, as I mentioned earlier, is to fund the completion of a number of RSAs in the region because we really want to help support project development of safety improvements in the region. And we're trying to provide sort of a structured but flexible framework to complete that work. And that's sort of summarized here on this slide. So I'll do my best to walk you through it. It's a lot going on. In the header row of this table that we have here, there are 3 types of RSAs shown in the orange, blue, and pink columns. And then over on the far right, we have the planning corridor feasibility study there, really for context, as a point of reference. I think all of us kind of understand what's included in a feasibility study. The blue column, that references the FHWA-based 8-step RSA process that I just walked you through over the last few slides. So that type of analysis, sort of from identifying the corridor and the team to finalizing the report, takes anywhere from 4 to 5 months, and some of that's dependent on the turnaround time for the agency response. It's looking like it's going to take a little bit longer for us to get that report back from our team with FHWA. There's a lot going on in the world right now, but generally that's about how long those takes. And the deliverable for that sort of RSA is a technical report that identifies the safety issues on the ground, a set of recommended improvements to be implemented over a short, midterm, or long-term horizon, along with planning level cost estimates. So that will be a type of RSA that we could work with our locals that are interested to do. A step up from that is what we're calling the RSA Plus option, which involves all of the steps that are included in the FHWA process, in addition to taking the next step on some of the key recommendations to develop concept plans for those recommendations and engineering cost estimates as well. Those may be more applicable for any safety projects that will be potentially implemented soon that you need concept level planning for and need to have a better idea of those cost estimates for your CIP planning. And then on the sort of less involved end of the spectrum, in that orange column, we have the high injury network countermeasure refinement option. The intent there is to complete field reviews in order to ground truth and adjust as needed the recommended countermeasures that were identified in your local Vision Zero action plan. Those for the most part, we're done using desktop level review. And so the intent is to provide sort of a team that can go out there, do some limited data collection. There wouldn't be as much of an onus to assemble an interdisciplinary team, but a team would go out to take a look at what's on the ground, make sure that the countermeasures that have been recommended would actually work, or if they may need to be adjusted in terms of where they land in the corridor. But the deliverable in that case would be sort of a graphics heavy technical memorandum that confirms which countermeasures are feasible, potentially identifies a few new safety countermeasures, and then provides an updated planning level cost estimate as needed. So as we gain a better understanding of our financial capacity to support these types of safety evaluations, we're going to be in touch with our local agency partners, and we'll send out sort of a call for projects of sorts where we'll ask our local agency partners to submit their RSA requests, to let us know which corridor or corridors are their top priorities, and what level of RSA from among the options that we have shown here would be the most useful to advance the development and implementation of those projects. I will iterate that each of these RSA types require some local agency involvement. So with the reach and sort of the number of potential team members increasing from left to right, depending what type of RSA you're interested in. So we'll be requiring a committed local agency project manager to be the point of contact for the RSAs, sort of similar to the Vision Zero experience. We'll have a MetroPlan staff member that's the point of contact as well, and then we'll have consultant support. So stay tuned for that. We're sort of waiting to see how things shake out with the grant so we know how many we can deliver, but we'll be in touch on those. Are there any questions at this point about the RSAs before we move on? Chat. All right, I don't see any hands. So I think we can go ahead to the next slide, please, Mike. I think you can go to the next slide as well.
Right.
All right. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes just to highlight FDOT's efforts to pursue the action steps that were identified in their safety strategic plan that was unveiled at last year's inaugural Central Florida Safety Summit. So over the past several months, FDOT has convened a number of working groups that sort of fall broadly into 3 areas that are summarized under that focus groups header on the left side of the slide. We have MetroPlan Orlando staff that's serving on groups in each of those 3 areas. And the groups have been doing some preliminary research and nailing down their work plans for 2025 over the last month or 2. And each focus group is going to be presenting their work plans at the next steering committee meeting that's occurring on April 4th, so next Friday. And then the second annual Central Florida Safety Summit is going to be on Friday, May 9th. You can see the save the date flyer there on the right. It's going to be at the International Speedway in Daytona Beach. It's pretty cool. And that event is intended to be a celebration of the ongoing implementation of the safety strategic plan, pardon me, and to provide a forum for District 5 and partners to recommit ourselves to getting to 0 fatalities and serious injury crashes. I didn't see if Lorraine was on. Let's see, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, I was going to give her a chance to say a few words, but Lorraine's not here. So there's no questions on that. I will hand it over next to Mike.
All right, thanks, Laura. Give you an update on what we're doing with MyoVision. So since late 2018, 2019, we've had MyoVision Scout cameras. MyoVision video system, it's portable. And after you collect the video, then artificial intelligence is used to do the counts. And they've since moved on to their next iteration, the Scout Plus, and we've got a couple of those. And from a capacity standpoint, what we can do with those, we can do regular road volume counts, we can do non-motorist counts, you can do them together, turning movements at intersections. They can now do near miss analysis. We used it for doing speed data for the RSA workshops, and they can also do counts and movements at roundabouts. The new units now have room for up to 3 batteries, and they're swappable, so you can actually go out there in the field and swap out batteries if you want to do longer counts. Historically, what we've been doing is just 48-hour counts because that was kind of the capacity of of the older units. And we're sort of continuing with that, but there's opportunities to do more. There is a limitation of when you've got an extra wide road or wide intersection to have 2 cameras, but we have the 2, so we can accommodate that. To give you some idea historically what we've been doing, we've done over 100 count locations now over the past 5+ years. Like I said, they're all 48-hour, mostly mid-block counts. We did a bicycle crash risk study back in 2019. We've been doing a number of baseline counts for projects where we know there's going to be a complete streets project or a side path project, so we can see what the before condition looks like. We've also been getting out there just doing some trail counts, some of the smaller trails that may not get as much attention. And we've also been putting them out for different contexts, classification areas, so we can get a better sense of how does context classification influence pedestrian and bicycle travel, and then how does that relate to type of accommodation? What's the nature of the road experience as well? And I mentioned the baseline counts. So we're looking for if you have more opportunities out there. This is what we've currently either done a baseline for, or that we're planning to do a baseline. No worries if you can't read it all, or if you don't spot yours. But if you think you have one that we might be interested in, just shoot me an email, and we'll talk about whether or not we've already done that, or how we can fit it in. We've got some time this year in our calendar to do some more deployments. Typically, what we like to do deployment-wise is from January through June. After that, you're too much into the thunderstorm season, and then hurricane season, and then the holidays. So the first half of the year is better for doing our counts. But happy to take any questions that anyone has about MyoVision. Like I said, if you have a specific request for a particular count location, just shoot me an email, and we could talk about that and how to make that work.
I don't see any hands.
All right, not seeing any either. All right, well, thank you. I will now hand over to Catherine to talk about the quick build guide.
All right, thanks, Mike. So you can go to the next slide. So just building on some of the other resources that were prepared as part of the Vision Zero action plan, including an engineering toolkit, and the non-engineering toolkit, a quick build guide was prepared. So this guide really builds on the projects that were identified in the engineering toolkit, and it provides additional information about the process to develop a quick build project, typical materials, and then implementation strategies, as well as evaluation strategy. So we're intending that this guide should be or could be used by local agencies to develop your own quick build program. And it really builds on quick build guides and other design guidance provided by cities across the country, including the city of Orlando. And we'll learn a little bit more about that process after this one. So next slide. So the guide is organized into 6 chapters, and so today we'll just kind of go through some of the highlights from each of the various chapters. And then the reference chapter is probably one of the most important pieces of that. So all of the resources that were used are referenced there. So it includes things like the NACDO guidance documents, the Florida Design Manual, Traffic Engineering Manual. So you're really encouraged to refer to those source documents with this quick build guide, really intended to provide a lot of inspiration. And then it's just sort of an idea of what you actually need to get some of these projects designed and built. So what is a quick build project? So it refers to an accelerated method of project delivery that really helps agencies implement infrastructure projects using low-cost materials that can be installed quickly. So quick build projects typically do not require or include relocation of curbs or utilities, and they really can also be used to pilot or test a design, with one outcome of a quick build project being a more permanent design. So next slide. So we've identified 4 key steps for a successful quick build project, including identifying potential projects within the community, reviewing potential projects with appropriate internal departments, and then identifying a project champion. So as I mentioned before, this document is intended to serve as inspiration for all the different quick build types. And it also includes some connections to different safety issues to help you identify what might be most appropriate. So once there's an idea for a project, the planning begins, which can include the development of design plans, an implementation plan, and then also identifying how project success will be determined. So in the planning phase, also identifying how the improvement will be constructed is critical. There are some communities that new signs and pavement markings can be installed by your own staff. Those communities might be able to get a lot of different things done, whereas in other communities, if you have to hire a contractor to do everything, it might not be quite as much of a quick build process. So once the project has been designed and the construction mechanism determined, it's time to build it. And then in some communities, stakeholders, community artists are invited to take part in the installation, while in others, it's really just done by the contractors or city staff. And then as part of building a project, a maintenance schedule should also be identified, as well as a process for removing the treatment if, based on the data analysis and feedback from the community, didn't quite go as well as planned. Next slide. The design guide also includes just some general design guidelines and considerations like emergency vehicle access, different design vehicles that you might need to think about, the implementation strategies, and then as I mentioned, thinking through what might need to be included in a maintenance plan. Next slide. So the most common materials that are used for quick build design projects are paint, low profile delineators, bollards, and parking stops. And we just have a couple of pictures here so you can orient you so you know what we're talking about. If we go to the next slide, we can see some other treatments also include quick curb, floating transit islands. These can come as prefabricated platforms. In some jurisdictions, these can actually be moved around to different locations to kind of test out different strategies. There's also rubberized devices like speed humps, speed cushions, raised crosswalks. Again, some of those materials are intended to be placed in a location, you pilot it out. If it works great, you might want to replace that with a more permanent installation, and then you can use the temporary one elsewhere in the community. And then there's also pavement surface coatings that can be used as well. And then signs and signal modifications are also a pretty big component of quick build project. Next slide. So for each of the common quick build materials, the guide provides some additional information related to the potential uses, the installation time, the maintenance needs, and then potential project types where you might consider those materials. And then just the sort of understanding that each project is located in a unique setting, and there's many elements that should be considered in the selection of materials. So for example, with the low profile delineators, placement should not obstruct an ADA path of travel, and then aesthetics might also be a consideration. And then some materials could pose new safety hazards. So for example, these low profile delineators could cause a trip hazard for pedestrians depending on pedestrian travel patterns in the areas where they're being installed. And then lastly, a lot of these different materials can be combined for increased benefit. Next slide. So similar to the engineering toolkit, the quick build treatments are organized by different categories of treatments. And overall, we have, I think it's over 50 quick build treatments identified. And then the guide also notes if the improvements are appropriate for a spot application, meaning you're just going to put that in at one location based on specific crash profiles, or if they're appropriate for a more systemic applications, such as installing leading pedestrian intervals at all crossings within a pedestrian core. And then some treatments kind of fall under both categories. And then a host of information is provided for each quick build project type, and I'll go through just a couple of examples. Next slide. So for each project or each quick build type, we have a definition of what the material and the treatment is, the expected crash reduction effectiveness, and that's based on published data and then crash modification factors from the Crash Modification Clearinghouse, the modal safety emphasis, and then the applicable facility types, as well as a cost range, so low, medium, and high. Next slide. And then a focus crash type is also provided to help pair crash patterns with treatment types and the primary safe system strategy that Adriana mentioned earlier, tied to that as well. And then whether or not you might want to consider pairing the treatment with other strategies. And then in some communities, potential locations for quick build projects may have already been identified through a different planning process. And in others, you might need to kind of do a little bit more analysis to identify appropriate locations. So we've added some of those considerations as well. And then we've also put in there a list of typical materials. So if all you have budget for is paint and maybe a few signs, you can scan through the quick build guide and figure out what strategies might be within your budget. Next slide. And then a key component of the quick build program is really the evaluation and engagement piece. So understanding how the treatment has contributed to improved safety outcomes and changed roadway user behavior is a key part to building and maintaining that community and political support. And without that, it might be hard to get additional projects implemented. So the evaluation section includes some proxy metrics that can be gathered more quickly after a quick build installation, rather than waiting 3 or 5 years for new crash data to evaluate. So some examples include looking at near miss data, driver speed, yielding rates, and then other observations really of all road user behaviors, like the number of people who might cross within a marked crossing area if you're constructing a new one as part of the quick build. So there's a lot of great information there in the guide. This is just a brief overview. So happy to answer any questions before we turn it over to Laura, who's going to share how it's all being done in Orlando.
I don't see any hands. Thank you, Catherine.
All right, take it away, Laura.
All right, so really glad to go right after Catherine because she really set the stage for you all with quick builds, and apologies to anyone who has seen me present recently on it. There's a lot of repetition, but I'll try to make it as tailored to this group as possible. So it was we can go to the next slide. I hit my arrow button like it was gonna do something. So in 2022, the city of Orlando really started in an intentional way on the quick build program. But like a lot of cities, you probably have done similar projects just to address safety issues. But what we found is that those were case by case, and it was really only, we didn't have a way to sort of learn from those other projects and really like build momentum with these quick build projects. So creating a guide was really important to us to get buy-in from other city departments and as much as possible standardize the process. The projects are still very much case by case. And if I could go back, I would probably rename it like quicker build guide because the projects are still they're quicker than capital projects, I think is the important part to remember. So when we crafted our guide, there were 4 main categories that we needed to make sure we were defining the difference between quick builds. And then so that's the timeline, process, materials. But to the next slide, the most important thing is the goals for each project. So we wanted, if we were going to embark on a quick build, we need to identify at least one of these goals. And then once you select the goal, it opens up sort of the rest of the process for you. For the City of Orlando, our evaluation is organized into these different goals. The materials and the project types are all organized under these goals. So I'll go through a couple projects that we have done. It depends on how you count a quick build project, how many we've done in the city. We have done, I believe at this point, every level of projects from demonstration, pilot to rapid. I've also found it helpful to take a project through each of these levels, especially if it's a big change for a community. It helps to ease into it. That's what we did with the Corinne pilot path. So I think that is the next slide. This goes over the life cycle of a project. So very similar to what MetroPlan has put out, starting with how you, where does the idea for a quick build happen? One important thing about the City of Orlando's guide is it is a combination of city-led and potentially community-led quick builds. So we wanted to open up this process for our community to tell us where they would want quick builds. So on our website, there's an interest form that residents can fill out, and it has them select their goal, and that they can drop on a map or tell us where they have an issue and what goal they want. And then it comes to city staff, and we screen it for all these wonderful things, crashes and existing projects and all of that. And if it's a good fit, we'll move it through. And currently the city is really leading a lot of these projects. But I think my goal and the future would be to have some community groups or some more modular projects that would be easier to sort of hand off to a local school if they wanted to do like a some type of demonstration activity or asphalt art for their pickup drop off, just so that we're not as limited by the resources at the city. Then really going into that build and transition. It's hard to say that we're going to take something out. So we're really focusing on transitioning and learning from the project while it's on the ground and making tweaks before we just say, oh, this didn't work, we've got to start over. Again, we saw that a lot with the Corinne pilot path, which I think is the next slide now. Yes, finally. So we started this project as just a pop-up, which was a one-day event for Walk and Roll to School Day, where we converted a underutilized parking lane into a walking and biking path. So we did that in 2022, and then we did it again in 2023. And the mayor said, let's make this more permanent. So then we went and graduated to a pilot path. And in doing so, we had to tweak the design a little bit. For the events, we had people walk at the driveways, actually, and some of the local streets, making sure that the kids were looking both ways and that cars were waiting for the big swaths of children. Going into a pilot path where people aren't going to be out on the streets 24/7, we had to make changes to the design to try to encourage that attentiveness without us there. And then after we discovered that the materials on the screen were not working out for us in terms of maintenance and durability, when we decided to go to a rapid project, which is a project that is on the street for an indeterminate amount of time, we changed the materials again. So we can go to the next slide. This is the executive summary of our evaluation. We threw in the kitchen sink for evaluation for this project since it was one of our first. So we measured a lot of things that I might not measure on future quick builds, just knowing the shortcomings of certain data points. But for this one, it was really helpful to have it all. My favorite thing on here is the 16% fewer speeding vehicles next to the path. I think this is a really important data point for us because we hear a lot about how on-street parking can be traffic calming, which is true. But this project shows that the separated bike lane is actually a better traffic calming element than the parking was. And we're providing space for people biking when they didn't have it before. So let's take a look at another project, which is on the next slide. Oh, there's the new design and sort of our what's next. So moving to the downtown asphalt art, which you saw a preview of some of these in Catherine's presentation. And to call back to Adriana's on the safe systems approach, this was a project where we really didn't have any changes we could make to the built environment for removing severe conflicts. So we landed at that increased attentiveness with the asphalt art. So when I'm talking about downtown asphalt art, I'm talking about these 4 murals on Orange Avenue, which I hope some of you all have seen since they're not far from the Metro Plan offices. I'm talking about 2 intersections on Orange Avenue that have artistic crosswalks and curb extensions. I think one of those is featured on the cover of Metro Plan's guide. And then I'm also talking about all of the intersections on Rosalind that we've put out artistic crosswalks, curb extensions, and a new one, bike lane bend outs, which is the closest thing we were able to get to a protected intersection with the bike lanes on Rosalind. So that is reflected in the total costs you see on the screen for those projects. It's a lot of projects. We can go to the next slide. I think I just got a couple pictures going through showing some of the installation process. So we use traffic paint for these murals because this road is supposed to be resurfaced and two-wayed in a shorter amount of time. So we chose a shorter material. And then we did touch these up. So if you've got any questions about traffic paint, I can talk to you in detail about all the things I learned, when to paint, when not to paint, how many coats of paint you might need, but very nuanced with some of these materials. So it's having a guide like Metro Plans can be very helpful shortcut for us. You can go to the next slide. This is our pavement marking contractors installing the thermoplastic material for the painted curb extensions and the artistic crosswalks. So this was a pretty complicated design. We usually stick to just 2 colors, but this one was so pretty, we allowed the 3 colors. And so they essentially lay down stencils and spray the thermoplastic on there. You do have to do special order colors, but it's not that different of a price versus like the green bike lane because it's the same material. You can go to the next slide. We've seen this before. So there's the curb extension. We have some flex posts out here. Really great feedback on these on Rosalind. I think the repetition of these along the corridor also helps with a bit of a traffic calming. We're still in the data analysis process for this. So I think you can go to the next slide, Mike. So how are we evaluating it? We pulled these performance measures from our guide and we used MyoVision. It's all coming together from the presentation today. We use our MyoVision cameras to collect data before, and then we're manually processing it. So that's taking a little bit of a time. I have an intern working on that. But I want to show you guys what that manual processing looks like. If you don't have a lot of money, but you do have an intern, you can collect this data via a spreadsheet. So we have to determine if an interaction is a high crash potential or a low crash potential through the video. So if you go ahead and play, We are looking kind of where that cyclist just was. We're going to be looking in that area of the roadway. Might be able to mark it right here. And this car. So I guess I can't really do, maybe if you all want to react, use the react button and do a thumbs up if you think this is a low crash potential interaction between that SUV and the pedestrians. Yes. So short answer is the driver properly yielded before they turned and allowed those pedestrians to cross. So we're seeing that the asphalt art has led to did I write? I think it was a 5% reduction in high crash potential interactions. And if you press play, Mike, this one's very obvious. So it's a high crash potential. We're looking at that pedestrian right there and that vehicle that just had to swerve out of the way for them. So we saw that these types of interactions went down about 5%, and we've only evaluated 2 of the 4 intersections. And so I think this is really telling. It goes along with the Bloomberg asphalt art study that said they would go down 50% ped bike crashes. But when we're looking at near misses, you might see even more benefit through that. So we've got the guide. We've got a couple really great projects in downtown and in our neighborhoods. But we did receive a SS4A grant to just take it to the next level with our quick builds. So we have 28 quick build sites throughout the city of Orlando that are supposed to influence our pedestrian plan for the city. So we'll do preliminary planning, but then we'll look at the results from these quick builds to help us prioritize which pedestrian projects we should really focus on to have the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to pedestrian safety. So if you go to the next slide, I have the 28 schools listed here, and we are partially obligated with this grant. So I have heard that from our point of contact at Federal Highways, they're most likely going to be obligated for this section. So I'm grateful and hopeful about that. So what we're looking at right now is bundling these. So 28 is a lot. It's a big step from just a couple downtown. So we're putting them into separate buckets. We're going to tackle the ones that are just that we can do with city crews. So that's going to be anything with traffic paint or just anchoring objects into the roadway. So like those low profile bike lane separators. That'll be design level 1. Design level 2 is going to be something that requires a contractor if it involves thermoplastic. And then design level 3 is a project that might require a little closer to roadway plans or larger scale or coordination with some of you on the call because it might be on an Orange County road or it might involve Lynx bus stop. So we put those into design level 3 because they're going to take more time, more involvement. So that's how we're bundling those to move forward. I would say in all, you could go to the next slide, Mike. The quick build guide and projects have been, it's always a lesson to learn. If you're looking for a cookie cutter approach to things, this is not exactly the spot for it, but the guide that MetroPlan has put out, other people's projects are helping really scale this type of work up and get it done quicker, but you will still learn very unique things about each of your projects. So as you go into more quick build projects, keep an open mind, and be adaptable. Those are like the keys to it. You have to be able to, willing to change your design, change your installation date, change your materials as you learn more things about the safety issues. So I hope I haven't gone over time, but so that's about all I've got on the quick build guide. Does anyone have any questions?
All right. I don't see any hands yet, but I have a question while we give people a chance to think. What's the schedule like for those 28 locations? As we will want to hear how things went and what your findings were. Throw back.
Yeah. So the generic schedule is about and Michael Greco's on the call from the city. He is the planner attached to that project. So you can chime in if you have better information than me, Michael. He's really helped bundle those together. So we've got concept. I would say that took us about 2 months. For design level 1, the design is going to take, I'd say, about a month for each design level. So 1 month for design level 1, 2 for 2, 3 for 3. We do have some federal highway approvals that we have to get in there. So that is really going to determine the rest of the schedule. And we have to move it around because we've been delayed due to the current review of federal grants. I think our initial idea was to start installing these this fall, and that might get moved back a little bit because of that delay. We have to receive another notice to proceed. So I think by the end of the year, we could see some of those design level 1s out there, and starting into next year, the design level 2.
All right, fantastic. Well, we will stay tuned for sure. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic member update, Laura. We appreciate it. And Mike, I think you can go to the next slide. We can get into meeting wrap up. So task force bylaws, as you all may be aware, the Vision Zero task force came about through a TAC subcommittee, and that eventually became the Vulnerable Users Working Group that we evolved into the Vision Zero task force as a means of outreach as we were doing developing our regional Vision Zero action plan. And now that that's been adopted and one of our actions is maintaining this task force, we're going to be carrying forward these quarterly meetings. We wanted to make things a little bit more official. So we've been working internally to develop some bylaws for the task force. This sort of touches on what the elements are within those bylaws, but we'll send those out along with the slides from this meeting for those of you who are not able to get those QR codes for the project-based safe systems tool. You'll have all of that sent to you to review. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. They're pretty straightforward. For those of you who serve on TAC or one of our other advisory committees, they're pretty similar to those bylaws as well. Next slide. And then I wanted to do a sort of early shout out to our upcoming Vision Zero Safety Speaker Series that we're also continuing. It's going to be mid-April. I think we're closing on maybe April 15th for the date, but do not quote me. Okay, Catherine's shaking her head, so probably April 15th. But stay tuned. We'll send out an email once that's been confirmed and we have all of the information for our speakers. But we're going to be focusing on how we can best collaborate for traffic calming installations to meet both our speed management needs while also making sure that we're having as minimal impact as possible on our response times for our emergency responders. And this is an issue sort of throughout the region and the nation, really. And so we have someone from Seminole County is going to be here to talk a little bit about their experience in this space. We'll also have someone from the city of Sarasota to talk about their traffic calming program and how they're coordinating. And then also a representative from San Francisco's Municipal Transportation Authority to talk about their experience as well. So it should be a good conversation. We hope that most of you are able to join us for that. If you're not, it'll be up on our YouTube page in our speaker series. I think we have a playlist for our speaker series. So stay on the lookout for that. Next slide, please. And then I wanted to open it up if anyone has comments, those of you who are panelists right now. If any of you have anything that you wanted to share or questions for the group or Metro Plan, you can sort of raise your hand and let us know that you want to speak.
Before we get to that, I just want to mention also that tomorrow morning I will be doing a webinar for our community advisory committee. Over the past couple of years, occasionally we get questions from the committee, particularly on bicycling issues, and we never really had the time to address them adequately during their regular meetings. So we're doing a special webinar to talk about factors affecting bicycle transportation and cyclist safety. So it's really, well, it's targeted to them. It's open to anyone. You can go to the Metro Plan calendar and find the link, the Zoom link for tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. And I see a hand raised by Emily. Go ahead.
Afternoon, thank you. I just had a couple updates that are kind of relevant to the conversations we're having. One, I don't know if you saw, but UCF's Distinguished Lecture Series is also on roadway fatalities. They're bringing in a speaker from Canada. So if you have not seen that, I can share that with you. I believe it's April 6th. It'll be in the evening with the networking hour, and then it'll be held at the UCF downtown campus. The second note that I wanted to make for everyone that is that the Best Foot Forward Summit this year is a part of the Central Florida Safety Summit on May 9th. So we will be doing our awards. We will be doing our kind of annual update on the program at that event. And we have been a part of the planning of that. So we've sent the save the date out to our partners, but I also wanted to let you know that through the Best Foot Forward program and contributions through MetroPlan and the central office through the rest of the program that we run throughout the rest of the counties, we will be paying for our members to participate in that program. So be on the lookout for registration information and specifically a coupon code, if you will, for the Best Foot Forward partners to register a member of their government agency and then one law enforcement partner to be able to participate. So I just wanted to make that announcement. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this working group.
Thank you for joining, Emily. Emily, will you send me the UCF Distinguished Speaker Series information, and I'll make sure that goes out with the task force bylaws and these slides.
Yeah, absolutely. It went out in our newsletter. So if you're not a recipient of our newsletter, I'd highly recommend that you join because we share all of these things, including things that MetroPlan does and all of their updates. We did share the quick build guide in our newsletter as well. But I will make sure to share the UCF note to you specifically, Laura, so you can send it out to everyone. But a shameless plug to make sure that you're receiving the Bike Walk newsletters in the future.
I love it. We're here for self-promotion, or not, your agency promotion. Anybody else have anything you'd like to share before we open it up for public comment? All right, I don't see any hands there. So we had someone earlier. There we go. All right, Courtney, I see your hand. I'll go ahead and see if I can promote you to a panelist.
I got it.
Oh, you're unmuted. You're unmuted.
There you go.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I think I'm in here now.
Yeah.
Moved you over.
Awesome. Hi, everybody.
Powerful.
If I'm on the timer now, I just wanted to highlight and share that we do have a hands-free driving bill in the Florida legislature right now. There's some good news that it's moving slowly forward on the Senate, was heard by the Transportation Committee, but I still want to urge the Central Florida partners and thinking in terms of your cities and your counties, municipalities, if you're open to proposing a resolution of support, I do still think we need to send a very strong local voice that this is important. Everything we've heard today is great to see all the engineering solutions and the things that can be done on the planning side to make our spaces safer for everybody. But I think we can all agree, and we've seen this can counteract all the good work of all of our partners. So would really love to follow up directly. Hopefully you guys know how to get a hold of me, president@floridabicycle.org. We have template text ready to go, but it could be hopefully a quick win and demonstrate your commitment to Vision Zero and a very straightforward safety law that could help a lot of people. Thank you, Laura and Mike.
Thank you, Courtney.
All right, I don't see any additional hands for public comment. So Mike, you can close this out.
All right, well, it's pretty straightforward. I just thank you all for your attendance and attention. And we will see you next time.
Everybody.
Thank you.